I remember the night I found out like it was yesterday. 6 months into dating Nora, things seemed perfect. She was everything I wanted, beautiful, caring, with this gentle way about her that made everyone around her feel special. We'd met at a friend's barbecue, and I fell hard. Real hard. The discovery wasn't dramatic. No caught in the act moment or anonymous tip-off. Just a phone lighting up on the coffee table while she was in the shower. A message preview from Eli that made my stomach drop. Last night was amazing. Miss you already. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I couldn't help myself. My hands were shaking as I picked up her phone. No password. She'd never seemed like she had anything to hide. The message thread with Eli went back months, right to when we'd started dating. Photos, late-night meetups, explicit messages about their encounters. Eli. The bartender at Murphy's where Nora used to hang out with her friends. I'd met him a couple times, always got a weird vibe from him. Now I knew why. He'd smirk at me across the bar, probably laughing inside about how he was screwing my girlfriend behind my back. The shower was still running when I found messages from just 2 days ago. They'd met up at his place after his shift. While I was working late at the construction site, thinking about surprising Nora with takeout from her favorite Thai place, she was with him. My hands were clenched so tight around her phone that my knuckles turned white. The rage building inside me was like nothing I'd ever felt before. I wanted to put my fist through a wall. Instead, I just sat there, scrolling through months of betrayal, each message feeling like a knife twist in my gut. When Nora came out of the shower, wrapped in her towel, her face dropped the moment she saw me with her phone. She knew. No screaming, no dramatic confrontation. Just silence as I placed her phone on the table and walked out of her apartment. She called and texted for days. Showed up at my place crying, begging for forgiveness. Said Eli meant nothing. That she'd ended it. That she loved me. I almost caved, wanted to believe her so badly it hurt. But those messages kept playing in my head, their secret jokes, the way they'd laugh about meeting up behind my back. The worst part wasn't even the physical cheating. It was the intimacy in those messages. The good morning texts, the inside jokes, the casual way they'd plan their next meetup while she was texting me about how much she missed me. Every memory of our early relationship was now tainted, knowing she'd been running to him the whole time. I eventually took her back. Stupid, maybe, but I loved her. We went to couples counseling, worked through it. We got married 2 years later. But something broke in me that night, a trust that never fully repaired. Every time her phone buzzes, every time she's late coming home, that old doubt creeps back in. Those messages from Eli are burned into my brain, a constant reminder of how easily the person you love can betray you. The therapist says I need to let it go. That holding on to this anger only hurts me. Maybe she's right. But how do you forget something like that? How do you look at the woman you love and not see the lies she was capable of? Some days I think I've moved past it. Other days it feels as fresh as that night with her phone in my hands, my world falling apart one message at a time. Living with suspicion is like having a constant shadow following you around. Even after Nora, and I tied the knot, I couldn't shake this gnawing feeling in my gut. Every time she picked up her phone, my jaw clenched. When she worked late, my mind wandered to dark places. The trust we tried to rebuild felt like a house of cards, ready to collapse at the slightest breeze. Last Tuesday I came home early from the construction site. The house was quiet, but Nora's car was in the driveway. Walking through the front door, I heard her laughing from the kitchen, that soft, musical laugh she used to give me before everything went to shit. My blood ran cold when I heard a male voice respond. I rounded the corner to find Ellie leaning against our kitchen counter, nursing a coffee in my favorite mug. My mug. In my house. "Jack, you're home early." Nora's smile faltered as she caught my expression. "Just catching up with an old friend," Eli said, flashing that same smug grin I remembered from the bar. "Was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd stop by." My fists clenched at my sides. The anger management techniques therapists taught me seemed miles away. All I could see was red. Remembering those messages I'd found on Nora's phone months ago. The pet names. The secret meetups. The lies. "In the neighborhood," I spat out. "Your bar's on the other side of town." "Can't a guy visit friends?" Eli set down the mug but kept that irritating smile. Nora was just telling me about her new class of 4th graders. "Get out." My voice came out low and dangerous. "Jack, please." Nora stepped between us. We were just talking. Just talking. Like you were just talking before. The words tasted bitter in my mouth. Ely raised his hands in mock surrender. Hey man, no need to get worked up. I'll go. He sauntered past me, and I caught a whiff of his cologne, the same scent that used to linger on Nora's clothes. My therapist would have told me to take deep breaths, count to 10, walk away. Instead, I watched him leave, imagining all the ways this could have gone differently if I didn't have to keep my anger in check. After the door closed, Nora turned to me. You can't keep doing this, Jack. He's just a friend now. A friend? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. He shows up at our house while I'm at work, and I'm supposed to be okay with that. You're supposed to trust me. Her voice cracked. We're married now. I chose you. After I caught you. The words hung between us like poison. Did you ever really end it with him? Or are you just better at hiding it now? Nora's face crumpled, but I couldn't stop. Every time I saw Ely, every time he happened to show up at local events or mutual friends' gatherings, it reopened wounds I thought had healed. And Nora let him. She always let him. With her polite smiles and friendly chats, like he hadn't helped destroy everything we'd built. The worst part wasn't even the anger anymore. It was the doubt. The constant, crushing weight of wondering if I was being paranoid or justified. If I was the bad guy for not being able to move past this, or if I was just being played for a fool again. It's like a knot tightening in my chest every time I think about Ely. That smug face of his in my kitchen. Nora, standing there in the middle, brushing it off like it was nothing. Jack, you're overreacting, she always says with that tone, like I'm the crazy one. Overreacting? How the hell am I supposed to not react when I walked in, heard them talking, saw his stupid grin? He's not just some friend. She swears they're done, that nothing happened this time, but the memories of all the lies from before, they snap right back like a trap. The therapy, yeah, I've been going. It keeps the worst parts in check most days. The counting techniques, the breathing. It works until I get around her dismissiveness. One look at her, sitting there texting on her phone or brushing me off with a wave, and all the restraint in the world doesn't help. The therapist says it's about trust, about building something new after the damage. But what if what's broken can't get fixed? Some mornings I pop another one of those little pills they gave me. Doesn't feel like much, other than it numbing everything for a few hours. Dulls the edge, sure, but it also makes me feel like I'm holding back a tidal wave just waiting to crash again. The worst part is the silence. I bring up Ely, how it bothered me seeing him here, the tension wrapping me tight. She shakes her head, tells me I'm dragging old dirt into our new life. Like I'm carrying the weight of a coffin on my back and she's twirling around like she's lighter without it. But keeping it all locked in doesn't do a damn thing. I've tried. I sit at work all day, chewing through problems with contractors and plans, yelling at guys when they screw up a job, thinking maybe I can sweat it out of me. Take it out on drywall or a bad call on site. Doesn't work though. I know when I walk through the door each night I've still got that pit somewhere down in my core, knowing Ely's around somewhere, and that people don't just change how they feel about someone like that. I couldn't shake this gnawing feeling in my gut. Something was off with Nora, little things that didn't add up. Her book club meetings started running later. She'd come home with her hair slightly disheveled, clothes wrinkled, the way she'd check her phone and quickly turn it face down when I walked into the room. I started keeping track of everything. Gathered her discarded receipts from the trash, noting timestamps and locations that didn't match where she said she'd been. Phone records showed calls to numbers I didn't recognize, always deleted from her recent calls list. The pieces weren't fitting together, and it was driving me insane. Last Tuesday, she said she was meeting the girls for drinks. I followed her car from a distance, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. She didn't head downtown to their usual spot. Instead, she drove out past the city limits, turning onto a gravel road that led to a cluster of rental cabins by the lake. My heart pounded as I killed the headlights and parked behind some trees. Through the darkness, I watched her car pull up to cabin 7. She got out, smoothed her dress, and walked to the door. It opened before she could knock. The light from inside illuminated a familiar silhouette, Ely's tall frame unmistakable in the doorway. I crept closer, staying in the shadows. Through gaps in the blinds, I could see into the cabin's main room. Ely handed her a glass of wine. They sat close on the couch, his hand on her knee. My vision blurred with rage as I watched him lean in to kiss her, the same way he must have done all those years ago. My body went numb. Every fear, every paranoid thought I'd tried to suppress came rushing back. The therapy, the medications, the promises we'd made, it was all meaningless. She'd been lying to my face while sneaking around with him this whole time. I stood there frozen, watching my marriage crumble through that window. Ely pulled her onto his lap. Her fingers ran through his hair as they kissed deeper. I wanted to burst through the door, to confront them both, to unleash years of pent-up rage, but I couldn't move, could barely breathe. The truth I'd been searching for was right in front of me, and it was destroying me completely. Standing in the dark, watching my wife in another man's arms, something broke inside me. All those years of trying to trust again, of fighting my instincts, they hadn't been paranoia after all. They'd been warning signs I should have heeded long ago. I parked my truck a mile down the dirt road from the cabin, hidden behind a cluster of dense pine trees. The dashboard clock read 8:47 p.m. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The familiar rage bubbled up inside me, but this time I wouldn't let it control me. I needed evidence, needed to be smart about this. My phone showed the GPS tracker I'd placed under Nora's car, the little blue dot stationary at the cabin. Eli's beat-up Camaro was probably there too, tucked away when he thought nobody would see it. Just like last time. I pulled out my phone and opened the video I'd taken 3 days ago. Nora walking into the cabin, Eli arriving 20 minutes later, the two of them on the deck, his hands all over my wife. The footage made me sick, but I forced myself to watch it again. Reminded myself why I was here, what I needed to do. The divorce papers sat in my glove compartment, already signed by me. My lawyer said the video evidence would help ensure a clean break. No alimony, no drawn-out battles. The thought gave me a grim satisfaction. I checked my watch again, 9:15 p.m. and to move. I grabbed my phone and the small camera I'd bought specifically for tonight. The walk to the cabin took 15 minutes through the woods, my boots crunching quietly on the fallen pine needles. Their cars came into view first, Nora's SUV and Eli's Camaro, parked close together like lovers. Warm light spilled from the cabin windows, and I could see movement inside. My heart pounded in my chest as I crept closer, staying in the shadows. I positioned myself near a window, camera ready. The sight through the glass made my stomach turn. They were on the couch, Nora curled into Eli's side like she used to do with me. My finger pressed the record button, documenting every painful second. This wasn't just about catching them anymore. I needed them to know they hadn't fooled me. Needed to see their faces when they realized their perfect little affair was about to implode. I'd wait until I had enough footage, then walk right through that front door. The rage I'd been containing started seeping through my careful control. Images flashed through my mind, all the lies, the therapy sessions where Nora swore she'd changed, the nights I lay awake wondering if I was paranoid or just stupid. Now I knew. I hadn't been crazy at all. My phone vibrated. A text from my lawyer confirming he'd received the previous videos. Everything was in place. The confrontation was inevitable now. Content warning contains graphic violence. The camera footage confirmed everything. Their bodies pressed against each other through the cabin window. Her hands in his hair, his lips on her neck. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. Hours of therapy, countless promises, all the trust we tried rebuilding, worthless. I burst out of the truck, my boots crunching on gravel. The wooden steps creaked under my weight as I charged up to the cabin door. Blood pounded in my ears. With one solid kick, the door flew open, splintering around the lock. Eli and Nora sprang apart. Her eyes went wide with terror. Eli moved first, grabbing a nearby lamp and swinging it at my head. I ducked, the lamp sailing past and shattering against the wall. Nora screamed, scrambling backward. My fist connected with Eli's jaw. The impact shot pain through my knuckles, but I barely felt it. He staggered back but stayed on his feet, raising his hands in a fighting stance. Blood trickled from his split lip. "Jack, stop." Nora grabbed my arm, trying to pull me away. I shook her off, sending her stumbling. Eli used the distraction to tackle me. We crashed into the coffee table, wood splintering beneath us. His elbow caught me in the ribs. I rolled, getting on top of him, raining down punches. His face was already bloody, but I couldn't stop. Years of rage and betrayal exploded through my fists. He bucked, almost throwing me off. His fingers clawed at my face, trying to gouge my eyes. Something in me snapped. I saw red. My thumbs found his eye sockets. Next thing I remember, Nora's shrieking finally cut through the red haze. I looked down at my hands, covered in blood and other things. Eli writhed beneath me, hands covering his ruined face, horrible sounds coming from his throat. Oh God! My stomach heaved. I scrambled backward, hitting the wall. Oh God, what did I? Nora was on her phone. Voice hysterical. Please hurry, there's so much blood. He needs an ambulance. The rage drained away, leaving nothing but cold horror. I slid down the wall, staring at my trembling hands. Eli's agonized moans filled the cabin. Nora knelt beside him, pressing a cloth to his face, trying to stop the bleeding. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. I didn't move when the police burst in, weapons drawn. Didn't resist as they cuffed me, rid my rights. Couldn't tear my eyes away from the dark stains on my hands, under my nails. They led me out past the paramedics rushing in. Nora wouldn't look at me. The last thing I heard before they put me in the cruiser was Eli's screams as they tried to treat him. The drive to the station passed in a blur. Reality felt distant, dreamlike. But the blood drying on my hands was real. What I'd done was real. The rage that had driven me to mutilate another human being, that was real too. And I knew with sickening clarity that I'd never be able to wash any of it away. I'll never forget the sound of those metal doors slamming shut behind me. It echoed louder than it should have, like they wanted to hammer at home the fact that I wasn't walking out of that place anytime soon. The trial had been a mess from the beginning. Nora and Eli, they sat on that stand and gave their perfect rehearsed lines. Nora's eyes brimmed with the right amount of sorrow while she spoke. She painted me as something unrecognizable, some monster who'd lost control. And Eli? Even with bandages covering most of his face, he still carried that smugness, the one only I could fucking see through. To everyone else, he was just a victim. The poor guy who got mutilated trying to defend himself. They talked about my anger like it was a ticking time bomb waiting to go off, detouring to my past like it somehow broke down the door into that fucking cabin. The prosecution paraded out my history, the swearing matches with neighbors, the time I threw a toolbox across a construction site because they were 2 weeks behind schedule. And of course the therapist who reluctantly confirmed I had aggression issues. Years of therapy, dumped out like it was more exhibitor material. When my lawyer tried to offer an explanation, it sounded weak even to me. Yeah, sure, you chase your lying wife and her lover to some remote cabin, and then what? Civilized conversation. The fact that I even had a camera on me didn't help. They got spun around to say I planned to expose them like some gotcha moment. What was supposed to be my salvation? Proof of her betrayal became evidence against me. They had a fucking field day with that fight. Eli's attorney spun it as me going in there hot-headed, fists flying, and him just trying to stop me before I tore the whole place apart. The eye gouging. The most brutal detail, of course. Couldn't leave that out. That was their cherry on top. Nora's sobs about how helpless she felt, how terrified she was. The entire courtroom lapped it up. Me? I wasn't just Jack Henderson, pissed-off husband. I was aggressive, volatile, dangerous. The story wasn't about a broken-down man who got tired of being lied to. It had morphed into something else, something uglier. And everyone in that room, jury included, believed it. They didn't need much deliberation time. The guilty verdict hit like a punch I hadn't braced for. I remember looking back, seeing Nora's face. Cold, detached, like I was just another man in her life spinning out of control. Eli sat there, bandages still on his face, his lawyer close by. Pity swarmed towards him, while all I caught were glares and judgments from everyone else. So now, here I was. The reality of concrete walls and metal bars, a place built to strip away everything. No moments of privacy, no space to breathe. I lay in that bunk bed most nights, head pounding from the noise, the shouting, the clang of steel, the constant reminder of where I was. Time started stretching weird, warping. Days blending into each other. When I first got here, I'd lie awake replaying it all in my mind, trying to figure out where it went wrong. There was this sick loop, you know. Eli and Nora on that couch. The sound of breaking glass when I came in full force. The way his screams started. I didn't even think about it in the moment. It just happened like my body was acting on something buried deep inside me. But in my cell, that brutal second stretched out forever. Flashing back to that fight, her useless screams filling the background. Some nights I'd wonder if I'd always been this way. If all that therapy I'd swallowed down for years was just a waste. An act so I could believe I was getting better, changing. And other nights I knew it didn't matter. Sometimes hate just grows, festers, and by the time you turn in front of a guy whose face is the picture of everything wrong in your life, your fists move before you decide anything. I talk to fewer and fewer people here. I don't trust anyone. I don't want to hear their story, and they sure as hell don't want mine. You'd think that would be the worst part, being alone like that. But I've gotten used to it. In some ways it feels easier than how I used to live, thinking I had it all figured out when really Nora was fucking around behind my back with someone who pretended to be my friend. That constant second guessing, watching for the signs, hoping I was wrong. Turns out she didn't even bother hiding them properly. The letters started coming about a month after I'd been locked away. From her, Nora. I never read them. The first one, I stared at it for what felt like hours, turning it over in my hands until I couldn't stand the sight of her handwriting anymore. The next one, I ripped it to shreds before even opening it. Whatever she had to say, I didn't care. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of closure. Not after she tore through everything we built. Funny thing is, looking back, I wonder what the hell I was fighting for at that cabin. It wasn't just her, though that's what really set me off. It was pride. The idea that I got played. That while I was sitting there trying to rebuild a life with her, to forgive, Eli had already slithered back in. And that was it. Fingers in his eyes, her screaming. All over control I never really had. I've been in here for 8 months now. The concrete walls and steel bars have become my new normal. Every day I walk past the same faces, eat the same food, and try to make sense of how I ended up here. The mandatory therapy sessions were rough at first. I didn't want to talk about what happened. But Dr. Martinez has a way of getting through. Your anger wasn't built in a day, Jack, she often reminds me, and it won't be dismantled in one either. Through other inmates, I hear bits and pieces about life outside. Nora moved away from our town, couldn't handle the whispers and stares. The story was too juicy for our small community, the teacher, the bartender, and the husband who snapped. Last I heard, she and Ely split up shortly after the trial. The trauma was too much for whatever they thought they had. During group therapy, I learned Ellie had to undergo multiple surgeries. He'll never regain full vision in his right eye. The guilt eats at me when I think about it. I'm not proud of what I did. That moment of rage cost 3 lives. Eli lost his sight, Nora lost her reputation, and I lost my freedom. The letters from Nora pile up in my cell. 17 of them now, all unopened. The guards joke that I should start a paper recycling program, but I can't bring myself to read them or throw them away. They sit there, like the weight of everything that happened. Through my sister's visits, I learned that Nora took a teaching position in another state. She's living with her parents now, trying to piece together some kind of life. The scandal followed her online, though. These days, you can't outrun your past by just moving towns. Eli's brother came to see me once. Told me Eli can't tend bar anymore, depth perception's shot to hell. He's on disability, barely leaves his apartment. Panic attacks, they say. Flinches at sudden movements. I did that to him. In my darkest moments, I thought I wanted revenge. Now I just feel hollow. Dr. Martinez says I'm making progress. The anger management techniques help. Deep breathing, counting to 10, identifying triggers. Simple stuff that might have prevented all this if I'd learned it sooner. But you can't change the past. You can only try to be better moving forward. They're talking about reducing my sentence for good behavior. But honestly, I'm not sure I deserve it. Some days this cell feels like the only place I can't hurt anyone else. At least in here I'm forced to face what I've done, who I've become, and who I want to be if I ever get another chance. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed the story, remember to like, subscribe, and comment on the video for more stories like this. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an update. If you have any similar stories to share, leave them in the comments and we'll make sure to bring them to life. Thanks for watching.